Kim Ji-hoon had eliminated threats, built an empire, and commanded fear with a single glance. Nothing surprised him anymore. Nothing moved him. Until a 7-year-old girl with 2 puffs of hair and beads that clicked when she moved drew him smiling. He hadn't smiled in 12 years, didn't even remember what his smile looked like. Yet there it was, captured in crayon on a crumpled piece of paper, offered by small hands stained with sidewalk chalk. "For you, mister," she'd whispered outside his restaurant in Koreatown, her voice barely audible over the Los Angeles traffic. He should have walked past her, should have told his men to move her along like they did with all the others who lingered too long near his establishment. But something about the way she looked at him, not with fear, not with calculation, just with the pure, uncomplicated hope of a child who believed a drawing could make someone happy, stopped him cold. Ji-hoon took the picture. Their fingers brushed. Hers were freezing despite the California sun. That night, in his penthouse overlooking the glittering city, he stared at that drawing for 3 hours straight, and something he'd thought long dead began to wake up. Ji-hoon first noticed her on a Tuesday. She sat on the sidewalk outside Lunar Eclipse, his upscale Korean fusion restaurant in the heart of Koreatown, Los Angeles. Most people hurried past the elegant establishment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and intimidating doorman. They sensed what it really was, a front for something darker, something dangerous. But this little girl just sat there, her back against the warm brick wall, drawing. She couldn't have been more than 7. Deep mahogany skin that caught the afternoon light, natural hair pulled into 2 puffs, decorated with bright beads that made soft clicking sounds when she moved her head. Her clothes were too big, a faded purple t-shirt that hung off one shoulder and jeans rolled up at the ankles, no shoes. Her feet were dirty. Ji-hoon watched her through the tinted window of his office on the 2nd floor. His restaurant manager, David, stood beside him, nervous as always in the boss's presence. "Should I call someone?" David asked carefully. "Child services, maybe?" "No." Ji-hoon's voice was flat, emotionless. He'd perfected that tone over 2 decades in this business. First in Seoul, then here in Los Angeles, where his family had sent him to expand their operations. Leave her. But he didn't stop watching. The girl drew with broken crayons, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. People walked by. Some dropped change in a paper cup beside her. Most ignored her completely. She thanked every person who gave her anything, her voice too quiet to hear through the glass, but her smile visible. Genuine. Unbroken by whatever circumstances had put her on this street. That smile bothered him. How could she smile like that? When the lunch rush ended, Ji-hoon descended the stairs to the main floor. His presence caused the usual reaction. Servers straightening, managers checking their stations, everyone suddenly very busy. He was tall for a Korean man, nearly 6 feet, and his tailored black suit emphasized his lean, athletic build. The tiger tattoo on the right side of his neck was partially visible above his collar, a reminder of who he'd been before the expensive clothes and legitimate businesses. He moved like a predator, controlled, precise, dangerous. Ji-hoon pushed through the heavy glass door and stepped into the September heat. The girl didn't notice him at first, too absorbed in her artwork. He stood there, shadow falling across her workspace, and waited. She looked up, brown eyes, so big they seemed to take up half her small face. No fear in them, just curiosity. She tilted her head, beads clicking, studying him the way he studied threats and opportunities. "Hi," she said. "What are you drawing?" The question surprised him. He hadn't meant to speak to her. She held up the paper. It was him, or rather, a child's interpretation of him. Black crayon for his hair, brown for his suit, careful lines that somehow captured his sharp jawline and intense eyes. But the most striking thing about the drawing was the smile she'd given him, wide and genuine, transforming his face into something he barely recognized. "It's you," she explained unnecessarily, "but happy. You look sad when you're real." No one had called him sad in 12 years. Dangerous, yes. Ruthless, definitely. Cold, calculated, terrifying. He'd been called all of those things. But sad? "I'm not sad," he said automatically. "Yes, you are." She said it with the absolute certainty only children possess. "Your eyes are sad. Even when you're not crying, sometimes eyes cry on the inside. My mama told me that before she went to heaven." Something twisted in Ji-hoon's chest. An unfamiliar sensation, almost like pain. Your mother is dead. Lydia nodded, her beads making their gentle music. 2 months and 5 days ago. She got sick and the doctors couldn't fix her. She said angels needed her more than me, but I don't think that's true. I need her a lot. Where's your father? Don't have one, just had Mama. She held up the drawing again, offering it to him with both hands like it was something precious. You can have this. Maybe it'll help your eyes stop crying on the inside. Ji-hoon stared at the picture, at the version of himself that smiled. He should walk away. Should tell David to call child services after all. This wasn't his problem. He'd built his empire by knowing which battles to fight and which to avoid. A homeless child was not his concern. He took the picture. What's your name? The words came out before he could stop them. Lydia, with an I. She spelled it out carefully. What's yours? Ji-hoon. She tried to repeat it, tongue struggling with the unfamiliar syllables. Ji-hoon? Close enough. The corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. Where are you staying, Lydia? She shrugged, a gesture far too casual for what it meant. Around. There's a nice spot under the bridge on 8th Street. It's not too loud there at night. A 7-year-old child sleeping under a bridge. In his territory, where his men conducted business, where dangers multiplied after dark, where things happened that no child should witness. Ji-hoon looked at the drawing again, at his crayon smile. Have you eaten today? Lydia's eyes widened. A lady gave me half a sandwich this morning. Turkey. It was really good. Half a sandwich. 1 meal. He spent more on a single bottle of soju than would feed this child for a week. Come inside, he said, already regretting it. I'll get you something to eat. Really? Hope bloomed across her small face, so bright it was almost painful to look at. You mean it? I don't say things I don't mean. He turned toward the restaurant, then paused when she didn't follow. She was gathering her crayons carefully, placing each broken piece back in a battered pencil case, protecting what little she had. Ji-hoon held the door open and watched her scramble to her feet. She was small, probably undernourished. Her bare feet left faint prints on the pristine floor of his restaurant as she entered, clutching her pencil case like treasure. David appeared immediately, alarm clear in his expression, as he took in the dirty child standing in the middle of their upscale establishment. Sir? Bring food, Ji-hoon ordered. Whatever's good, and juice, not soda. Of course, sir. David disappeared, probably wondering if his boss had lost his mind. Maybe he had. Maybe staring at a crayon drawing of himself smiling had cracked something fundamental in his carefully constructed world. Lydia stood in the middle of the dining room, spinning slowly to take in the elegant decor. The paper lanterns, the silk wall hangings with Korean calligraphy, the dark wood tables. It's so pretty, she breathed, like a palace. Not a palace, a cage covered in silk and lies. But he didn't say that. Sit, he instructed, pulling out a chair at a corner table away from the windows. She climbed into the seat, feet dangling above the floor, and watched him with those impossibly big eyes as he folded himself into the chair across from her. They sat in silence until the food came. Lydia ate like someone who didn't know when her next meal would come. Ji-hoon watched her demolish bulgogi, japchae and kimchi fried rice with a desperation that made his jaw tighten. She tried to maintain manners, tried to use the chopsticks even though her small hands struggled with them. But hunger won out. Eventually she abandoned the utensils and used her fingers, mumbling apologies between bites. It's okay, he said quietly. Just eat. She did. She ate until her stomach visibly rounded beneath the oversized shirt. When she finally slowed, her eyes were half closed, exhaustion creeping in now that her belly was full. Where will you go tonight? Ji-hoon asked, though he already knew the answer. Already knew what he was going to do, even if he didn't understand why. The bridge, Lydia said around a yawn. It's not so bad. Sometimes other people are there, and they share blankets. Other homeless people, other dangers, other things that could happen to a 7-year-old girl with no protection, and no one who cared if she disappeared. Ji-hoon had built his empire on calculated decisions, risk versus reward, cost versus benefit. There was no benefit to what he was about to do, only cost and complication and a drawing of himself smiling that he couldn't stop thinking about. Not tonight, he said. Tonight you stay with me. Lydia's head snapped up, suddenly alert. Really? Where? I have an apartment, extra space. An entire penthouse, actually. 5,000 square feet of luxury he rarely enjoyed, because he was always working, always planning, always fighting battles that never ended. You can have your own room. Suspicion flickered across her young face. She might be 7, but the streets taught hard lessons fast. Why are you being nice to me? Good question. He didn't have a good answer. Because your mama was right, he finally said. My eyes are crying on the inside. Maybe helping you will make them stop. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but just for tonight. I don't want to be a bother. Just for tonight. That's what he told himself too. Ji-hoon's penthouse occupied the top floor of a luxury building in downtown LA, far from the grit of Koreatown where his business operated. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city lights sprawling to the horizon. Marble floors, designer furniture, art that cost more than most people made in a year. Cold, pristine, empty. Lydia walked through the front door and froze. It's so big, she whispered, as if afraid to speak too loudly. Do you live here all by yourself? Yes. That's sad. She said it matter-of-factly. Big spaces are for lots of people. That's what Mama said. She always wanted a big apartment where we could have friends over for dinner. No one came to Ji-hoon's penthouse, not friends. He didn't have those. Not women. They were business transactions, nothing more. Not family. They were in Seoul maintaining the empire's roots while he handled American expansion. Just him, alone with his expensive things and his dark thoughts. You can use this room. He pushed open a door to a guest suite he'd never used. King bed with silk sheets, private bathroom, a view of the city that people paid premium rates to photograph. There are clothes in the closet. They'll be too big, but it has its own bathroom, Lydia interrupted, eyes wide as moons. Yes, with a shower and a bathtub. She looked at him like he'd just offered her the world. Maybe he had. Can I take a bath? I haven't had one since Mama. Since before. Something in his chest tightened again. That strange, painful sensation he didn't have a name for. Of course, there's soap and shampoo. Take as long as you need. She disappeared into the bathroom, and moments later he heard water running. He stood in the doorway of the guest room, staring at the space that had been empty for 5 years, trying to understand what he'd just done. His phone buzzed. David texting, "Sir, is everything okay?" The child. She's fine. Don't ask questions. Ji-hoon moved to his study, pulled out his laptop, and began researching. Child Protective Services, foster care system, legal guardianship. The information he found made his jaw clench. Overcrowded facilities, abuse statistics, children who disappeared into a system that didn't have enough resources or enough people who truly cared. Lydia would become a number, a file. Another kid lost in the shuffle. The drawing lay on his desk where he'd set it. Crayon Ji-hoon smiled up at him. Impossible and mocking and somehow hopeful all at once. "Jongmal maishotguna," he muttered to himself in Korean. "You've really lost your mind." An hour later, he heard the bathroom door open. He found Lydia in the guest room, swimming in one of his old t-shirts that reached her ankles like a dress. Her hair was wet, the puffs loosened, and she looked smaller and more vulnerable than before, but also cleaner. Safer. She was already half asleep on her feet. "There's a bed," he said unnecessarily. She climbed onto it, disappearing into the massive pillows. Her eyes started to close, then suddenly opened. "Mr. Ji-hoon?" "Just Ji-hoon." "Ji-hoon, will you stay?" "Just until I fall asleep. Mama always stayed until I fell asleep. The dark is scary when you're alone." He should say no. Should maintain distance and boundaries and remember this was temporary. Just one night. Just a moment of inexplicable compassion that would pass. Instead, he pulled the chair from the desk over to the bedside and sat down. "I'll stay," he said quietly. Lydia smiled, that same bright, genuine smile from the sidewalk, and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing evened out, asleep, safe, warm. Ji-hoon sat there for 2 hours watching her sleep, and felt something crack open inside him, something he'd locked away when he'd first killed a man at 19, when he'd chosen this life of violence and power and isolation, when he'd decided that caring about anything made you weak, The tiger tattoo on his neck seemed to burn. He'd gotten it at 20 after his first year in the Korean Mafia. A symbol of strength and protection. But who had he protected? What had he used his strength for besides destroying enemies and building an empire of fear? His phone buzzed again. Business. Always business. Problems that needed solving, money that needed moving, threats that needed addressing. He ignored it all. Instead, he went to his kitchen, the designer space he rarely used, and opened the stainless steel refrigerator, empty except for soju, leftover takeout, and bottled water. He cleared a space on the door and, using a magnet from some corporate gift he'd never thrown away, attached Lydia's drawing. Crayon Ji-hoon smiled at him every time he opened the fridge now. He should feel ridiculous, a crime lord with a child's artwork on his refrigerator. Instead, he felt something else, something that might have been hope. Just for tonight became 3 nights, then a week. Ji-hoon told himself he was just figuring out the right way to handle the situation, finding the best placement for her, making sure she ended up somewhere safe. That's all. But every morning, he found reasons not to make those calls. Lydia transformed his penthouse. Her artwork appeared everywhere, taped to walls, spread across the coffee table, filling the previously sterile space with color and life. She drew constantly. The city skyline, the view from her window, his restaurant, and him. Always him, in different situations. Ji-hoon reading, Ji-hoon cooking, Ji-hoon looking out the window, always smiling in the pictures, never smiling in reality. "Why do you always draw me happy?" he asked one afternoon, watching her work on a new piece at the dining table. She didn't look up from her paper. "Because that's how you're supposed to be. You just forgot. I'm reminding you." How did you argue with that? He'd bought her clothes, real clothes that fit. At first, she'd tried to choose the cheapest items, uncomfortable with spending his money. It took patience he didn't know he possessed to convince her to pick things she actually liked. Now her closet held dresses in bright colors, jeans that didn't need rolling up, and shoes. So many shoes. She particularly loved a pair of sneakers with lights that flashed when she walked. School was another matter. "You need education," Ji-hoon said one morning over breakfast. He'd learned to make simple things, eggs, toast, fruit. She always ate every bite, and that pleased him in a way he didn't examine too closely. Lydia's face fell. "I can't go to school. I don't have papers." That's what Mama said. We didn't have the right papers. Undocumented, of course. Another complication, another problem he didn't know how to solve through legal means. But Ji-hoon hadn't built an empire by following rules. 3 days later, Lydia had a birth certificate, social security number, and immunization records, all perfectly legal-looking, all completely fabricated by people who owed him favors and didn't ask questions. He enrolled her at a prestigious private school near his penthouse, the kind of place where senators' children studied, alongside tech moguls' kids. The admissions director barely glanced at the paperwork, too busy being impressed by Ji-hoon's apparent wealth and status. "Your daughter is lucky to have such a dedicated father," she'd said, smiling. "Your daughter." The words echoed in Ji-hoon's head for days. Lydia's first day of school terrified her. She stood in the penthouse entryway in her new uniform, navy skirt, white blouse, matching cardigan, looking small and scared. Her hair was styled in neat cornrows with colorful beads at the ends, done by a woman Ji-hoon had paid a premium to come to the apartment. He'd watched the process, learning. The care required, the patience, the way Lydia had relaxed under gentle hands. "What if the other kids don't like me?" she whispered, clutching her new backpack. Ji-hoon crouched down to her level, something that would have been unthinkable 3 weeks ago. His men would have gaped in shock. The fearsome Kim Ji-hoon kneeling for a 7-year-old. "Then they're stupid," he said bluntly. "You're smart, kind, and talented. If they can't see that, it's their loss. But what if Lydia?" He waited until her anxious eyes met his. "You survived losing your mama. You survived living on the streets. You survived being alone. A classroom full of privileged kids who've never known real hardship. You can handle that." She bit her lip, thinking, then nodded. "Okay, and if anyone is mean to you?" His voice dropped lower, the tone he used on enemies. "You tell me. No one hurts you. Not anymore. Because you're protecting me? Because you're mine." The words came out before he'd thought about them, but he didn't take them back. Lydia's face split into that brilliant smile. She threw her arms around his neck, hugging him fiercely. I love you. Ji-hoon. His breath caught. No one had said those words to him in 12 years, not since his mother, before he'd disappointed her by becoming what he'd become, before he'd chosen violence and power over honor and tradition. Saranghae, he whispered in Korean. Love you. The words felt rusty, unused, but true. She pulled back, trying to repeat the phrase. Saranghae? Close enough. He drove her to school himself, unusual since he normally had a driver. Walked her to the entrance, watched her hesitate at the door, then square her small shoulders and walk inside. Brave. So much braver than he'd been at her age. Ji-hoon sat in his car for 10 minutes after she disappeared, staring at the school building, wondering what the hell he was doing. Then his phone rang. Business. Reality reasserting itself. He answered it, slipping back into his other self. The dangerous one. The one Lydia didn't know existed. She came home that afternoon glowing with excitement, chattering about her teacher, the library, the playground. He listened to every word while pretending to work on his laptop, absorbing her happiness like sunlight. And I made a friend, Lydia announced. Her name is Sophie and she likes to draw too, and she invited me to her birthday party next month. Can I go, please? A birthday party. Normal childhood activities, the kind of thing he'd never considered in his world of violence and secrets. Yes, of course. You'll have to meet her parents first. That's what they do here. Parents meet parents. She said it so casually, not understanding the impossibility. What would he say? Hello, I'm a Korean crime lord. Yes, I traffic in illegal goods and occasionally have people killed. How was your day? But he'd figure it out. He always did. That night, after she'd gone to bed, Ji-hoon stood in front of his refrigerator. The original drawing was still there, but now it was joined by dozens of others. His refrigerator looked like a gallery, a shrine to a little girl's belief that he could be happy. He pulled out his phone and took a picture, sent it to his second-in-command, Min Seo, with no explanation. Min Seo called immediately. What is that? Art. Boss. Is that a child's drawings? Yes. Long pause. Are you feeling okay? Should I be concerned? Ji-hoon almost smiled. Almost. I'm fine, better than fine, actually. That's what concerns me. But Min Seo's voice held amusement. The men are talking, by the way, saying you've been different, softer. Not soft, just... He searched for the word. Finding balance. Because of a child? Because of my daughter. The word felt right, natural, true. Min Seo was quiet for a moment. Then, your mother would be proud. This is honorable. Protecting the defenseless. It's what we're supposed to do. After they hung up, Ji-hoon looked at the drawings again, at the hundreds of versions of himself, all smiling, all the person Lydia saw when she looked at him. Maybe he could become that person. Maybe he already was. 3 months after Lydia came into his life, everything changed during a Thursday afternoon. Ji-hoon had started leaving work early on Thursdays, parent-teacher conferences, school events, or just being home when she got back. His organization adapted. His men learned to handle more without him. Strangely, things ran smoother. He made better decisions with a clear head and a reason to come home. That Thursday, he picked Lydia up from school himself. She bounded to the car with her backpack bouncing, climbed into the booster seat he'd installed, and immediately started talking about her day. Something about a science project. He listened, asking questions, genuinely interested. They stopped for ice cream, her favorite, strawberry with rainbow sprinkles. His, green tea. She always laughed at his choice. Old man ice cream, she called it. I'm not old, he protested mildly. You're 38. That's almost 40. Mama said 40 is when you become officially old. Your mama was wise. Lydia's expression softened. She didn't cry when she talked about her mother anymore, but the sadness lingered. She would have liked you. She always said I should find good people to love. Am I good people? The best people, said with absolute conviction. They ate their ice cream at a park near the penthouse. Lydia ran to the playground, joining other children on the swings. Ji-hoon sat on a bench watching her. Mothers and nannies sat nearby, casting curious glances at the tall Korean man in the expensive suit, alone among the casual parents. A woman sat down next to him, mid-40s, friendly smile. "Which one is yours?" "The girl on the swings with the cornrows." "She's beautiful. How old?" 7. "Same as my daughter." The woman pointed to a blonde child on the monkey bars. "It's nice to see involved dads. So many just aren't." She kept talking. Ji-hoon made appropriate responses, but his attention stayed on Lydia, who was laughing as she swung higher and higher, her beads clicking in rhythm. His daughter. When had he stopped qualifying that? When had she stopped being the child I'm helping and become simply his? He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Maybe it was the first time she'd called him Dad instead of Ji-hoon, a slip she'd immediately apologized for until he told her it was okay. Maybe it was when he'd stayed up all night researching second-grade math to help with her homework. Maybe it was the morning he'd woken up, and the first thought in his head was whether she'd remembered her lunch. Or maybe it was every moment combined, every drawing, every meal, every bedtime story, every conversation, the accumulated weight of caring about someone more than yourself. "Daddy." Lydia called from the swings. "Watch this!" She jumped at the apex of her swing, flying through the air for one heart-stopping moment before landing in the sand with a proud grin. Ji-hoon's heart nearly stopped. "Be careful." "I am. Did you see? I flew." The woman next to him laughed. "They're fearless at this age, terrifying for us parents." Parents. She'd called him a parent, because he was. Regardless of blood or paperwork or legal definitions, he was her parent. She was his daughter. The truth of it settled into his bones, immovable and absolute. That evening, after dinner, Lydia worked on a new drawing. She'd been secretive about this one all week, hiding it whenever he came near. "Can I see?" he asked, loading the dishwasher. Another task he'd learned. His home was no longer pristine and empty. It was lived in, messy, full. "Not yet. It's not finished." He dried his hands and came to stand behind her chair, looking over her shoulder. She hunched over the paper, trying to block his view, but he was too tall. The drawing showed 2 figures, one large, one small. The small one held the large one's hand. Both were smiling. Above them, she'd written in careful letters, "My family." Something broke open in Ji-hoon's chest, not painfully, the opposite, like a dam releasing pressure he'd carried for decades. "Lydia." She turned in her chair, suddenly anxious. "Is it okay? I know I'm not really your family, not like with blood and stuff, but you feel like family. You feel like my dad. Is that okay?" He knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to eye level. Her anxious expression mirrored what he felt inside, the fear of wanting something you didn't think you deserved. "Deo johul sun eobso," he said quietly. "It couldn't be better." "What does that mean?" "It means yes. You are my family. You are my daughter." He touched the drawing gently. "This is perfect." Her eyes filled with tears. Happy tears. "Really? You mean it? I can call you Dad?" "Abba," he said. "That's Korean for Dad. Or you can call me whatever you want, as long as you want to stay." "Forever?" Her voice was small, hopeful, scared to believe. "Forever. I'm going to adopt you. Officially, legally, so everyone knows you're mine." Lydia launched herself at him, wrapping thin arms around his neck. She was crying for real now, soaking his expensive shirt with tears. "I love you, Dad. I love you so much." "Nado saranghe dal." "I love you too, daughter." They stayed like that for a long time. Father and daughter, found family. 2 broken people who'd somehow made each other whole. Later that night, after Lydia had fallen asleep, Ji-hoon made phone calls. To lawyers. To connections. To people who could make the adoption process move faster than normal. Money exchanged hands. Paperwork began. Min Seo called while he was organizing documents. "You're really doing this? Full adoption?" "Yes." "The organization won't like it. Makes you vulnerable. They'll say she's a weakness." "Let them say it." Ji-hoon's voice went cold. "Anyone who threatens my daughter will discover exactly how weak I am. Or rather, how ruthless I can be when protecting what's mine." "That's what I thought you'd say." Min Seo paused. "For what it's worth, I think it's good. You've seemed different. Better. She's been good for you." "She saved me," Ji-hoon said quietly. "I didn't even know I needed saving, but she saw it. Saw something in me worth saving. I won't let her down. After hanging up, he went to Lydia's room. She was sprawled across the bed, hair wrapped in a silk scarf, stuffed animals surrounding her. She'd had nightmares the first few weeks, waking up terrified and crying for her mother. But not lately. Now she slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that someone would be there in the morning. He adjusted her blanket, careful not to wake her, then returned to his study. The original drawing, the one that had started everything, hung framed on his wall now. He'd had it professionally preserved, matted and framed like the masterpiece it was. Crayon Ji-hoon smiled at him. And finally, 3 months late, Real Ji-hoon smiled back. The adoption finalized on a Tuesday in December, 4 months after Lydia had offered him a drawing outside his restaurant. The courtroom was small, intimate. Present were Ji-hoon, Lydia, their lawyer, the judge, and Min Seo, who'd insisted on attending. Someone needs to witness your complete transformation from heartless criminal to sentimental father, he'd joked. Lydia wore a new dress, navy blue with white flowers. Her hair was styled in intricate braids that had taken him an hour to complete that morning. He'd practiced, watched videos, asked for help from women in his organization who had daughters. He still wasn't great at it, but he tried. That's what mattered. "Do you understand what adoption means?" the judge asked Lydia kindly. She was a black woman in her 60s, eyes warm behind her glasses. Lydia nodded seriously. "It means he's choosing to be my dad, forever, even though we don't have the same blood." "That's exactly right. And is that what you want?" "Yes, ma'am, more than anything." The judge turned to Ji-hoon. "Mr. Kim, you understand the responsibilities you're undertaking. This is a legal and moral commitment to raise this child as your own." "I understand." His voice was steady, certain. "I've been her father in my heart for months. This just makes it official." The judge smiled. "Then by the power vested in me by the state of California, I grant this adoption. Lydia Kim, you are now the legal daughter of Kim Ji-hoon. Congratulations to you both." The gavel came down. Lydia squealed and threw herself into Ji-hoon's arms. He caught her, held her tight, and felt something he hadn't felt in over a decade. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "I'm a Kim now?" she asked, pulling back to look at him. "You're a Kim now, Lydia Kim." "That sounds so cool." She tested it out. "Lydia Kim. Lydia Kim. I'm Lydia Kim, and this is my dad, Kim Ji-hoon." Min Seo laughed. The judge was smiling. Even their lawyer looked misty-eyed. They celebrated with lunch at a Korean barbecue restaurant, not one of Ji-hoon's establishments, just a family place in Koreatown where the owner knew him and didn't ask questions. Lydia had become proficient with chopsticks, though she still struggled with the more slippery items. She'd also developed a love for kimchi that amused Ji-hoon endlessly. "My American daughter with Korean taste buds," he'd say. "I'm both now," she'd correct. "American and Korean, that's what you said, I get both." She was right. He'd told her that her black American heritage was just as important as his Korean heritage. They celebrated both. Her room reflected both cultures. Traditional Korean art alongside photos of black excellence, K-pop posters next to books about black history. She was learning Korean and learning about her own roots simultaneously. "When can I meet Grandma?" Lydia asked around a mouthful of bulgogi. Ji-hoon's mother. He'd been avoiding that conversation. His mother still lived in Seoul, traditional and stern. She'd been disappointed when he'd chosen this life. Hadn't spoken to him in years beyond brief, cold phone calls about business. But last month, he'd told her about Lydia, sent pictures, explained that he'd adopted a daughter. The response had been silence for 3 days. Then, "Bring her to meet me." "Soon," Ji-hoon promised. "We'll visit Korea in the spring. She'll love you." "Will she love me? I don't speak Korean very good yet." "Well, you don't speak Korean well yet. And she'll love you because you're you. Also, you're learning fast. Better than I learned English." It was true. Lydia absorbed languages like a sponge. She already knew basic phrases, could understand simple conversations. Her teacher said she was reading above grade level in English too. Smart girl. His smart girl. After lunch, they walked through Koreatown. Lydia held his hand, chattering about school, her friends, the upcoming winter break. People stared. They always did. A tall Korean man in expensive clothes walking hand in hand with a small black girl who called him Dad and looked at him like he hung the moon. Let them stare. She was his daughter. He was her father. Nothing else mattered. They passed the spot where they'd met, where she'd sat with her crayons, offering art to strangers, hungry and alone and hoping someone would notice her. Ji-hoon noticed, and his life had changed completely. "Do you remember?" Lydia asked, following his gaze. "Every detail. I was so scared that day, but also, I don't know. I saw you and I thought maybe you needed a friend. You looked so lonely." "I was lonely, I just didn't know it." She squeezed his hand. "You're not lonely anymore." "No," he agreed. "I'm not." That evening, Ji-hoon received a call that would have terrified him months ago. Now it just annoyed him. "We have a situation," Min-seo said. "The Tanaka group is pushing back on the territory agreement. They want to meet. Business, violence. The world he'd tried to keep separate from Lydia but knew would eventually collide." "When?" "Tonight, 10 o'clock. He glanced at the clock. 7:30. Lydia would need to be in bed by 8:30. He could make both. "Fine, but Min-seo?" "No one mentions my daughter. That part of my life stays separate." "Understood." "Understood." After tucking Lydia in, she insisted on reading him a story this time, struggling through the words with determined concentration. Ji-hoon changed clothes. Black shirt, black pants, the tiger tattoo visible, his business persona. Lydia caught him before he left. She'd gotten up for water and found him by the door. "You're going to work?" She'd learned not to ask too many questions about his work. Smart girl. "Yes, I'll be back before you wake up." She studied him, those perceptive eyes that saw too much. "Be safe, Dad. People need you. I need you." The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders, not crushing, grounding. "I'll always come back to you," he promised. "Always." She hugged him, then padded back to bed. The meeting with the Tanaka group went as expected. Posturing, threats, negotiations. But Ji-hoon found his patience for violence had shortened. He'd discovered he had better things to do than waste time on territory disputes. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, cutting through the circular argument. "We split the difference. You get 5th Street to 8th. I get 8th to 12th. We both make money, nobody bleeds, or we fight, people die, we both lose profit, while the authorities take an interest. Your choice." The Tanaka boss studied him. "You've changed, Kim. They say you've gone soft. Test that theory if you want." Ji-hoon's voice went arctic. "But I promise you'll regret it. I haven't gone soft. I've just found better reasons to be ruthless, like protecting my time with my daughter." Understanding flickered in the man's eyes. Family. Everyone in this world understood family. "The split works." The Tanaka boss finally agreed. Ji-hoon was home by midnight. He checked on Lydia, still sleeping peacefully, then stood in his study, looking at the wall of drawings. Hundreds now. Everyone precious. The original held pride of place. Him, smiling. The version of himself a 7-year-old girl had seen before he'd seen it himself. He touched the frame gently. "Thank you," he thought, "for seeing me, for saving me, for being mine." His phone lit up with a text from his mother in Seoul. "Spring is too long to wait. I'm coming to LA next month. I want to meet my granddaughter." Ji-hoon smiled, a real smile that would have shocked his organization. His mother was coming. Lydia would meet her grandmother. They were building a family across continents and cultures, all because a hungry little girl had drawn a picture and seen something in him worth saving. 6 months later, Ji-hoon sat in Lydia's 3rd-grade classroom for Parent Career Day. Other parents talked about being lawyers, doctors, engineers. When it was his turn, Lydia introduced him with pride. "This is my dad. He owns restaurants and helps people." Not entirely inaccurate. He did own restaurants. He did help people. She didn't need to know about the other aspects, not yet. Maybe not ever. He talked about business management, about Korean culture, about immigrating to America and building something from nothing. The children listened, fascinated. The teacher thanked him warmly. Walking out with Lydia afterward, she looked up at him. "You were nervous." "Was I?" "Your jaw was tight, like when you're worried. But you did great. All my friends think you're cool. Sophie's mom asked if you were single." She wrinkled her nose. I said you were too busy being my dad for girlfriend stuff. He laughed. Actually laughed. Good answer. They stopped for ice cream, their Thursday tradition now. She got strawberry with rainbow sprinkles. He got green tea. Still old man ice cream, she teased. I'm distinguished. You're smiling more. She said it casually, but her eyes were serious. Your eyes don't cry on the inside anymore. Ji-hoon looked at his daughter, his fierce, artistic, perceptive daughter, who'd seen his soul on a sidewalk and decided it was worth saving, and felt overwhelming gratitude. No, he agreed quietly. They don't. You fixed them. We fixed each other, Dad. That's what families do. That evening she drew a new picture. 2 figures holding hands, both smiling. Above them, careful letters. The smiling tiger and his cub. Ji-hoon hung it on the refrigerator next to all the others. His collection was growing, just like his heart.